Okay, so Bitcoin, everyone's always talking about it, right? But today we're diving into something you don't hear every day. A prediction that Bitcoin's going to hit $600,000 by the middle of 2025. Now, before you think we've gone off the deep end, we're actually basing this entire deep dive on an article we found, and it really breaks down the logic behind this prediction.
Yeah, that's right. We're looking at this article called, get this, educational article, Understanding Plan B's Bitcoin Price Prediction and Its Implications.
Touchy, I know.
And the whole thing basically revolves around something called the stock-to-flow model.
The stock-to-flow model, or as the cool kids call it, the S2F model. Okay, so for those of us who don't have PhDs in economics, what is this S2F thing?
Well, think of it like this. Imagine you've got, I don't know, a super rare comic book, like one of only a handful in existence, and even fewer people are willing to sell it. What happens?
You're sitting on a gold mine. That thing's worth a fortune.
Exactly. High demand, very limited supply, the price is going to skyrocket. That's basically what the S2F model argues about Bitcoin. As a fixed supply, there's only ever going to be a certain number of Bitcoins out in the world. And to make things even more interesting,
It gets more interesting.
it does. Every few years, this thing called a halving happens. And when that happens, the rate at which new Bitcoins are created, it gets cut in half, just like the name suggests. So over time, they become even scarcer.
So it's like that comic book, except instead of sitting in a collector's vault, it's like digital gold that's designed to become harder and harder to mine.
Exactly. And it's that built-in scarcity that has some analysts believing Bitcoin could hit those crazy prices, like that $600,000 prediction.
Okay, but why $600,000 and why 2025?
Well, one of the things the article points out is that Bitcoin's price right now is actually very similar to where it was back in 2020, right before it went on this massive bull run in 2021.
So it's like history might be repeating itself, but on an even bigger scale this time.
That's the idea.
Okay, so we've got this whole scarcity thing, the S2F model, but then there's another piece to this puzzle, right? What about all those big investors, the institutions that are starting to dip their toes into the crypto waters? The article mentions this huge surge in Bitcoin ETF investments, like $136 million in just 4 days. What's going on there?
Yeah, so ETFs, or exchange-traded funds, they're kind of like a more user-friendly way for these big institutions, think hedge funds, pension funds, to get exposure to Bitcoin without having to deal with actually buying and storing the digital currency itself.
So it's like instead of buying a whole bunch of shares of like Apple stock, you're buying into this fund that's basically a basket of Bitcoin.
Exactly. And when you have these huge players like BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, when they launch a Bitcoin ETF, that sends a pretty big signal to the rest of the market.
It's like, hey, if BlackRock's doing it, maybe we should too.
It definitely legitimizes it in a way. And, this ties right back to that $600,000 prediction, right?
Yeah.
You've got this limited supply of Bitcoin. You've got all this new money flowing in from these institutions. And boom, potentially massive price surge.
It's like a recipe for, well, you said it, a potential Bitcoin explosion.
Potentially. Now, of course, we can't forget about the human element here either.
Mm.
I mean, markets are not just driven by cold, hard data.
No, definitely not. People make emotional decisions all the time, whether they realize it or not. It's that whole fear of missing out thing.
Exactly. And you see that a lot with Bitcoin, this almost like cult-like following.
Right, the article talks about that, this whole culture around Bitcoin, all the online discussions, the content creation even.
Like they're not just buying into an investment, they're buying into an idea.
A philosophy, almost.
Right.
Which, speaking of philosophy, can we talk about the U.S. government's role in all of this? Because the article really dives into this back and forth between Congress and the SEC. And to be honest, it seems like even they don't know what to do about crypto.
Yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of regulation, which can make traditional investors hesitant.
Yeah.
They like knowing the rules of the game before they start playing.
Of course, everyone wants that clarity. But then the article throws this curveball, this argument that Bitcoin could be considered free speech. I mean, that's a whole other can of worms.
It is, but if that argument actually gains traction, if a court actually upholds that, wow, that could be huge. Because then you're not just talking about Bitcoin as an asset, you're talking about it as a protected form of expression.
Okay, so how does that impact this whole $600,000 by 2025 prediction? Does it make it more likely? Less likely?
It's really hard to say. On one hand, any kind of regulatory clarity, even if it comes from a kind of unexpected place, it could make Bitcoin more attractive to those more traditional investors.
But then again, more scrutiny, right? Maybe even limitations on how Bitcoin can be used. Who knows?
It really is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Just goes to show there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding the future of Bitcoin.
Uncertainty seems to be the name of the game with crypto, huh?
It really does, doesn't it? But that's also part of what makes this whole thing so captivating, right? It's like we're watching something potentially revolutionary unfold right in front of us, and no one has all the answers.
It's true. And even just with this deep dive, focusing on the $600,000 prediction, we've gone from trying to wrap our heads around this complex S2F model to like the psychology of markets and what makes people tick to considering Bitcoin as, get this, free speech. It's wild.
Yeah, and let's not forget about those institutional investors, right? I mean,
Right.
they're playing a huge role in how this whole thing unfolds.
Huge role. It's like a financial thriller, except it's actually happening. So to everyone listening, even if you're not ready to put all your money into Bitcoin, understanding these forces at play, these different perspectives, that's what matters.
Couldn't agree more. The more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this whole new world of finance that's emerging.
Exactly. So yeah, keep those minds curious, folks. If this deep dive sparked some questions for you, which I hope it did, don't stop here. Keep researching, keep digging, see what else is out there. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Bitcoin's future. Until next time.